The small village of Misty Moor was known for its quiet, peaceful life. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened. That was until one foggy morning, when the villagers woke up to find that the old lighthouse keeper, Mr. Harold Grimes, had disappeared without a trace. The lighthouse, which stood tall on the edge of the cliffs, had been a landmark for sailors for over a century. Mr. Grimes had been its keeper for as long as anyone could remember. He was a solitary man, rarely seen in the village, but his sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. Detective Clara Hayes was called in to investigate. She was a sharp, observant woman with a reputation for solving the most baffling cases. As she drove into Misty Moor, the fog was so thick that she could barely see the road ahead. The village looked like something out of a ghost story, with its cobblestone streets and old creaky houses. Clara's first stop was the lighthouse. The door was unlocked, and the inside was eerily quiet. The main room was cluttered with old maps, nautical instruments, and dusty books. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing. The lighthouse lamp was still on, casting a faint glow through the fog. Why would Mr. Grimes leave the light on if he wasn't here? Clara wondered aloud. She began to search the room for clues. On the desk, she found a half-finished cup of tea and an open journal. The last entry was dated the previous night. It read, "The fog is thicker than usual tonight. I feel like I'm being watched. Something isn't right." Clara's instincts told her that Mr. Grimes hadn't left willingly. She decided to speak to the villagers to see if anyone had seen or heard anything unusual. Her first visit was to Mrs. Eliza Brown, the village baker. Eliza was a kind, elderly woman who knew everyone in Misty Moor. "Did Mr. Grimes have any enemies?" Clara asked. Eliza shook her head. "No, he kept to himself. But there's been talk lately about strange lights out at sea. Some say they've seen a ghost ship in the fog." Clara raised an eyebrow. "A ghost ship?" "Yes," Eliza said, lowering her voice. "They say it appears out of nowhere and then vanishes just as quickly. Some believe it's an omen of bad luck." Clara thanked Eliza and continued her investigation. Next, she visited the local fisherman, Tom Wilkins. Tom was a gruff man with a weathered face and calloused hands. "Have you seen anything unusual out at sea?" Clara asked. Tom nodded. I have. Last night, I saw a ship with no lights, just a dark silhouette. It was heading toward the cliffs, but then it disappeared into the fog. I thought it was my imagination, but now with Mr. Grimes gone." Clara's mind raced. A ghost ship, strange lights, and a missing lighthouse keeper. There had to be a connection. She returned to the lighthouse and decided to search the surrounding area. The cliffs were treacherous, with jagged rocks and crashing waves below. As she walked along the edge, she noticed something glinting in the fog. It was a small, silver locket. Clara picked it up and opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman. On the back, there was an inscription to Harold, with love. "Always." "Harold?" Clara muttered. "Mr. Grimes?" She realized that the locket must belong to him. But who was the woman in the photograph? And why was the locket lying on the edge of the cliff? Clara's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound coming from below. She peered over the edge and saw a narrow path leading down to a hidden cave. The sound was coming from inside. Carefully, she made her way down the path and entered the cave. The air was damp and cold, and the walls were covered in moss. As she ventured deeper, she heard a weak voice calling for help. "Mr. Grimes?" Clara called out. "Here." "I'm here," the voice replied. Clara followed the sound and found Mr. Grimes lying on the ground, injured but alive. His face was pale, and his clothes were torn. "What happened?" Clara asked as she helped him sit up. I saw the ship," Mr. Grimes stammered. "It wasn't a ghost ship. It was real. They came ashore and took me by force. They wanted me to turn off the lighthouse so their ship could pass unnoticed. But I refused. They left me here to die." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Who were they?" "Smugglers," Mr. Grimes said. "They've been using the fog to hide their activities." But I recognized one of them. It was Tom Wilkins, the fisherman. Clara's heart sank. Tom had seemed so genuine when she spoke to him earlier. But now, it all made sense. The strange lights, the ghost ship, and Mr. Grimes' disappearance were all part of a smuggling operation. With Mr. Grimes safe, Clara returned to the village and confronted Tom. At first, he denied everything, but when Clara showed him the locket and explained what Mr. Grimes had told her, he broke down and confessed. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," Tom said, his voice trembling. "I just wanted to make some extra money." But when Mr. Grimes refused to cooperate, the others panicked and took him. Clara arrested Tom and called for backup to track down the rest of the smugglers. As the fog began to lift, the village of Misty Moor returned to its peaceful ways. The lighthouse lamp continued to shine, guiding sailors safely to shore. Detective Clara Hayes stood on the cliffs, watching the waves crash against the rocks. Another mystery solved, but she knew there would always be more. For a detective like her, the chase never ended.